Welcome to another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Thanksgiving edition of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I am your host, Michael. Along with me again is my co-host, Ken. How you doing this week, Ken?
Good. How you doing?
No, hanging in there. For those who are new to the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the Pound for Pound Boxing Report is a show slash podcast slash blog that talks all things boxing. Our motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. The bottom line is we will talk about it. There are two main places where you can go to find information about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. There is the Pound for Pound Boxing Report blog page by the same name, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Address for that is p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. Let me repeat that, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. You can also go to the podcast page, and the link and the address for that is p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com. Let me repeat that, p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com. If you go to either of those pages, you can find information on where to find past episodes, as well as links to where to find the show on Facebook, on WordPress, on Podomatic, on Tumblr, on Google+, on YouTube, the email address for the show, Pinterest board, RSS feed, as well as a link to where you can donate your account. And the address for that is donateyouraccount.com/P4pboxingreport. And repeat that, donateyouraccount.com/P4pboxingreport. Be a friend, be a pal, be a buddy. Donate your Twitter account to the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. And what happens is any tweet that comes from the Pound for Pound Boxing Report Twitter page, your Twitter handle will automatically have the option to retweet it. So be a friend, be a pal, be a buddy. Donate your Twitter account, help support the show. With that being said, all those housekeeping orders out the way, Ken, let's get the show started this week by doing a recap of the events that happened this past weekend. Let's start with the big fight, of course, the return of Manny Pacquiao. 11 months out from his knockout loss to Juan Manuel Marquez. He returned to the ring in Macau, China to fight former lightweight champion Brandon Rios. Fight with the distance, 12 rounds. Pacquiao scoring an easy decision. We said before the show, Kent, that in looking in analysis, breaking down the fight last week, that this fight looks pretty made to order for Pacquiao. If he's there physically, and if he's there more importantly mentally and psychologically, he should have his way with Rios. And he did exactly just that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't give Rios one round. I mean, I was actually kind of shocked that the two judges gave him a round. One of the judges gave him a round, and the other judge gave him 2 rounds. I thought it was a clean sweep for Manny. He won every round. First thing I noticed was instead of being reckless in this fight, like going all wild, he fought in a more controlled manner. I think that's because, first off, I think he's lost a little bit of speed. He's not as fast as he used to be, so he has to fight in a way where he can use his hand speed, but and pop, but at the same time not expose himself to be countered. And I think he did that pretty effectively throughout the fight. He fought in spots. He showed, flashes of the old Manny. Fought smartly. Rios, in the early rounds, he showed toughness. He tried to get to Manny's body. I mean, none of the body shots really affected Manny at all. And as the fight went on, as Manny became, more and more dominant, I mean, with his flurries of activity, it seemed like Rios just started covering up more. He didn't really have an answer for Manny. The speed and the power was too much, like I thought. And I thought that at some point that Rios would quit, but no, he kept going out there. I mean, he was getting dominated. I mean, the entire fight, and he just never gave up. I think at a certain point he just realized he wasn't going to win the fight. So let's just, he just kind of covered up, drew punches here and there, but he really just kind of coasted the last couple of rounds. Especially probably from round 7 on, he kind of coasted. I think he knew he was going to get beat. There was no way he could deal with. He was also getting frustrated. So I think all in all, it was a very good performance for Manny. considering he had not really anybody in front of him that was, you know, going to be a threat. And I just think Manny did what he needed to do to erase that knockout loss to Marquez, and I think he did that pretty well.
Two questions. You talking about how Rios kind of fought all the way. I kind of pushed back against that. I was a little disappointed in his performance because I think after a while, after maybe round 6, 8, he kind of gave in and kind of silently conceded defeat.
Yeah,
didn't try as hard. Didn't try as hard. That's number one. Number two, in terms of Manny, do you think? To me, I look at this and Manny had opportunities to stop him, but didn't. The old Manny would not have done that. Your impressions of that?
I'll be honest with you. Like I said, I think he's lost a little bit of speed, and he has to fight in a way now that's more, I don't know, like careful, but at the same time explosive. It's kind of I think he kind of didn't go full force because there's always because that's the way he got caught in the Marquez fight. He was going out to try to take care of business, and he got caught by a counter shot that he ran into, and I think he didn't want to run into a shot again and get knocked and get stopped again. And I don't blame him for that. I mean I think he could have finished him anytime he wanted to, but I think once he was comfortably ahead, there was no reason to take any unnecessary risk. And I do agree that Rios from maybe round 7 on, he kind of covered up. And he did throw punches here and there, but in the earlier rounds, the first half of the fight, he did fight. I mean, he did try. I just think he got frustrated. I think he just couldn't handle the speed. He couldn't handle the pop, and he knew this, and he was just happy to probably survive and make it through the rest of the fight. He also suffered a cut. His other eye was swollen. He took some shots. I mean, I give him credit though. He was game for a big part of the fight. I think he just tanked it in. I think during most of the second half, I just think he was just there to survive, and he did. And he didn't get knocked out. I think which is good, I guess, in his mind, that he was able to say, "Oh, I went the distance with the great Manny Pacquiao." But at the same time, I mean, where was the fire like he showed in past fights?
That's my point. That's my point right there.
Like I figured, even though he was getting beat, I mean, and he kind of I think he just let the frustration get the best of him, and he just threw in the towel. Mentally, he threw in the towel.
See, the same balls to the wall dude that we've seen in the past. I didn't see that from Rios from jump. I didn't see that at any point during the fight.
No. Even though he was fighting in the first half of the fight, I give him credit for his toughness. I just think that he just didn't show that second gear that we've known him to have. He didn't go for broke. When we thought he would go for broke, he just covered up. I mean, actually, if you think about it, it was just a very, very for the first half of the fight, he was in the fight. He was losing, but he was at least in it. Like, you could see there was moments where he could do something, but in the second half of the fight, he just mentally packed it in. That's very unusual. It's very unusual. I don't know if it's the fact.
Excuse me for interrupting, Ken. But do you think the moment of the event, just got to him?
You want to know my honest opinion?
Go ahead.
I think, with his wife and his new kid, I think there's kind of the stigma. Like, he's probably like, there's no sense in me getting beat up like before. I think he wants his health. That's what I think it is. Because you notice during the 24/7 they showed his wife and his new kid, and I think part of him wants to be healthy for them. I think his mentality as a fighter may be changing a little bit. And you know what? To a degree, like, the way I see it as a person outside of the ring, that's great. You don't want to, take so much punishment that you end up, where you're suffering outside of the ring later in life. That's great, but I think we're seeing a little bit of change in Rios. A little bit. Just a little bit. I mean, I don't know if that returns again. Maybe it does. I don't know. But he seems like you could see like there's a change in his mindset as a fighter. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but I think that's a very, very, very telling sign that Rios maybe, he may be worried about his health, and maybe he's just, these next couple of fights he has, maybe he's looking towards maybe, calling it a career. I don't know. It just that seemed that way to me, like during the fight. Like he wasn't willing to take the risk that he used to take. I don't know if you observed that during 24/7, but that was one thing that I noticed.
I didn't think of it in that way, but you very well could be right. You very well could be right. He's just thinking more about his career, the fact that he's married, he has kids now. He's not that same gung-ho guy in and out of the ring that he was. Let's talk about moving forward here in terms of the fight. With Pacquiao, everybody's talking about, well, Floyd Mayweather in the aftermath of this decision over Rios. Floyd Mayweather. Bob Arum made a statement that a bout between Pacquiao and Mayweather could be made if all the shenanigans, for lack of a better word, get out the way. But before the show, you was telling me something you heard from Floyd Mayweather Sr. About the prospect of a future bout between Mayweather and Pacquiao that gives you cause to pause, that gives you doubts to whether that fight will happen.
Yeah, he pretty much went out to essentially went out to the media, Floyd Sr., because he's not at a loss for words. He always got something to say. And he said just because he dominated Rios doesn't mean he deserves a fight with Floyd. That basically tells me right there's no interest in a fight. We don't want to fight him. We're worried about fighting Khan, which is a waste of time, but you already know that.
Yeah, man, listen. I may not watch that bout just out of boycott. That's just as a boycott.
That's just terrible. That's terrible.
That's a joke.
Boxing fans. I feel bad for boxing fans. I feel bad for the people he's suckering, into believing he's going to actually fight somebody dangerous, and he's not. He's not. Listen, I respect Floyd, but I'm going to say this very, very clearly. How could a guy who claims he's the greatest fighter ever constantly fight B-level fighters? Doesn't make no sense to me. It doesn't. It never made sense to me. And I'm not against Floyd, and I'm not going to rag on him, okay? But at the same time, he could make a fight with Pacquiao right now. Why he doesn't, I don't know. It would be both the biggest paydays of their lives. I mean, yeah, the fervor for it and the interest is not there like it was a few years ago, but I mean, it's still something that once people warm up to it again, they'll want to see it, and I think it'll do better than Mayweather Canelo numbers wise. I can't see it doing worse. It's going to do a lot better, and I think it'd be great if they fought, but Floyd Sr. always got to put the kibosh in something. Always got to do it. That's basically saying, well, no, we don't want to fight. And you know what? That's just that, unfortunately. And I even said after the fight, there's no way that Manny and Floyd fight. I even said it to people. They're not going to fight because somebody is going to, make some sort of stupid comment or make some statement, negating that. And guess what? Floyd Sr. did it. He did it. And you knew he was going to do it. I knew deep down he was going to do it, or somebody from that camp was going to do it, either him or Ellerby or Heyman or someone, and it turned out to be Senior, and that's just it. What I think Manny should do is not even worry about that fight. Just try to maybe look at a possible rematch with Bradley or a fifth fight with Marquez or even a young guy, coming up, but I wouldn't even worry about Floyd. Unless they really want to fight, I wouldn't even worry about fighting him.
How about the possibility of a bout with Garcia?
I don't know. I don't know what Golden Boy will do. I don't know if they're willing to
If for those who don't know who I'm talking about, I'm referring to Danny Garcia, junior welterweight champion, who just a few months back uh, pretty much dominated Lucas Matisse.
yeah, I don't know what Golden Boy will do. I think this would be a nice opportunity to end the Cold War. I mean, it would be a nice way to end it. But I don't know what they're gonna do, and they're just gonna probably do their own thing. But guess what? At the end of the day, Top Rank makes more money with their in-house fights. That is a universal truth that will not change anytime soon. And if Golden Boy doesn't want to work with Top Rank, they're gonna keep doing their thing. They're gonna keep making money. They're gonna keep becoming that global power in boxing that it looks like they're leading towards. And I mean, whatever. I mean, if Golden Boy doesn't work with Top Rank on this or try to make it, I think, you see, Bob is really trying to break that. He's really trying to end that. He seems like he wants to end it. Like he's probably saying, you know what? We can make money here. It doesn't have to be all of it. I mean, yeah, last year he went, oh, there's no interest in working with Golden Boy, but I think that was a lot of talk. I think he sees the potential of making a lot of money with them, and listen, he's not against working with anybody, Bob Arum. Listen, this is the man that worked with Don King for Duran and Leonard.
And they were bitter enemies.
Yes, and yes they are, and they still are, and they still manage it. So it can still be done. So they don't give me that nonsense that it can't be done. If they sat down and they put all the BS aside, they could make a fight between Manny and Floyd, or Manny or anyone at Golden Boy. But it is what it is. So I think Manny should look at what I said, Bradley. Rematch with Bradley, rematch with Marquez, or somebody at Top Rank. I wouldn't or anyone, or even Provodnikov.
I wouldn't even be. That's what I was going to say. I wouldn't be mad at a Provodnikov bout at this point. Yeah, but
since they're both trained by the same guy, it seems unlikely. But it's possible. Anything in boxing is possible. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on and talk about the main undercard of that Pacquiao Rios bout, rematch between Evgeny Gradovich and Billy Dibb. For those who don't know, Gradovich upset Billy Dibb to take the IBF belt back in March of this year. They fought a rematch here in Macau after Dibb exercised his rematch clause. We talked about, I mentioned last week when we were discussing this bout that I think that Gradovich beats him in easier fashion this time, possibly stops him, and he did just that. Gradovich got off to a bit of a slow start early again, but by the fifth round, he had picked it up and pretty much dominated Dibb. From that point on, Dibb, he tried hard, but as I was saying last week, look, he's not a good enough boxer to outbox Gradovich. He doesn't have enough in his arsenal to hold Gradovich off, and that's exactly what happened. Eventually, it just came to a point that Gradovich just overwhelmed Billy Dibb over time and just stopped him.
Yeah, it's exactly how I thought it would go. Man had, essentially 10 weeks to prepare, 12 weeks to prepare. I mean, Gradovich looked really good. I mean, he looked better than he did in the first Dibb fight. Because I will say Dibb, in the early part of the fight, had a different game plan. He actually tried to box from the outside. It was a good college try. I mean, it was a good idea. It was a very good idea in theory. But when
swell.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good idea, but it just didn't work because Gradovich is a very strong fighter, and Gradovich found a way to land on Dibb when Dibb was trying to get more outside distance. He found a way to land shots while Dibb was on the outside, which he hadn't done in the first fight. This was a little bit of an adjustment. So he really went to school on Dibb, and he got off to a slow start in the first few rounds, But then he started to gauge in and started to zero in, landing his shots. And once he started landing his shots, it got ugly really quick. Gradovich scored a knockdown in round 6. That was a pretty good shot he landed on him. BoxRec, I believe, said it was a flash knockdown. That wasn't a flash knockdown. That was a pretty solid shot. And then he just beat him up 7, 8. Round 9, he really took it to him in round 9. It was the fight. That was like the worst point of the fight for Dib, and his corner just drew in the towel. They stopped it. It was a beating. It was a real beating. I mean, it was worse than the first fight, I think, for Dib. Because remember, Dib actually was competitive for maybe the first 5 rounds, or 6 rounds in that fight, and then Gradovich really took over. In this fight, it seemed like he was only competitive for maybe 2.5 rounds. You know, Gradovich made adjustments. I mean, he looked really, really good, and he looks even stronger than he had, you know, in their first fight. And I mean, he took Dib apart. I mean, look what he did to Dib's face. Cut him over the eye, swelled up the other eye. And listen, people say, oh, Gradovich only got 9 knockouts in his 18 wins. I think he's a better puncher than that.
He's the type of guy who may not have the knockout numbers, but if you get in the ring with him, you're going to be sore and beat up afterwards because he has that thudding, really thudding power that may not tell in terms of knockdowns, but you hurt afterwards. Not to the point of a Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., but it has that similar kind of effect when you're in the ring with him.
Yeah, and the thing is, he doesn't physically break you, he mentally breaks you. Because he's just an immense pressure fighter. He throws over 100 punches around. You can't stop. It's going to take somebody that hits very, very, very hard to stop him. Or a very, very good boxer to outslick him. I don't think there's anybody at 126 right now that can really do that. Not that I can tell. I mean, unless somebody's, you know, coming up on the horizon. But I just don't see anybody beating him right now. And he's improving. That's the scary thing. He's improving. It's not like he's regressing. He's getting better. I mean, that was the best he's looked since I mean, that was the best he's looked ever on Saturday. That was the best he's ever looked. I mean, and he's a tough dude, and he just pressures a guy, pressures him, hits you, beats you up, and eventually it just mentally breaks you because you can't stop the punches from coming no matter what you do. Look at Dib tried his best to stop the punches from coming. He tried to box, it didn't work. He ended up getting in another war with Gradovich. It didn't work out again. And there was really nothing Dib could do. He doesn't have the power to hurt him, and he's not a good enough boxer to let. He's clearly not a good enough boxer to keep him away. So, I thought a really good performance for Gradovich. I thought he kind of solidified himself as a top 3 featherweight.
Anticipated that Gradovich may fight Nonito Donaire early part of 2014. Your thoughts on that bout? You was talking about how you don't think that nobody can really, may not be able to deal with Gradovich. Looking at the featherweight landscape, do you think that Gradovich may be the best at 126 right now?
He could very well be. I don't see him fighting Donaire. No matter what people say, I just don't see that fight happening. I mean, they're both with Robert Garcia. You already know that story. And there's some decent guys at the weight, but, I mean, you can make an argument he's probably top 3. I mean, I would put Sillakh up there and a couple other guys. I mean, I'd love to see him fight Nicholas Walters. That'd be a fight that would make him look very, very good. Because I don't think Nicholas Walters... I mean, he's a good fighter, but I just don't think he can keep Gradovich away. It's going to be very, very. I don't think he's the type of puncher to keep Gradovich away. I think he has a good punch, but nothing to keep him away. Nothing to deter him from pressuring him and breaking him down. And that would be a good fight for him. You got the Sillakh fight, unless he fights Lomachenko. And there's another name, Loma. I mean, right now, like he could fight whoever at this point. But he's probably in the top three. Top three, I'd say top three.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, I don't think he's just a pressure fighter. The fact that Gradovich, the way he adjusted midway in his fight in the rematch with Dib Saturday, I think that speaks to his boxing brain. And I think he's a much more of a skilled guy. I think he's more intelligent than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I think he. You know what I do like about him is he can make adjustments on the fly.
Yes.
Not a dumb fighter. He's a very smart fighter. He seems to be a guy that studies a lot of tape. He looked at Dib after their first fight, and he adjusted to what Dib was trying to do, and I think he adjusted to that quicker, and he took care of business. And that's. I mean, that was the best. That performance by Gradovich was the best you could hope for. I never thought he would shut him out. I thought I had it a shutout. I didn't give Dib one round. I mean, in the early part of the fight, it was competitive, but as the rounds went on, it was just clear who was the boss. And I think he's more of a, even though he's a pressure fighter, I think he can make adjustments. I think he knows how to box a little bit. So, I mean, I think we're going to see more improvements from him from as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the name of the show is named Controversy in Manchester. The reason I named that was because of the fight we're going to talk about now. That's the fight that happened in Manchester, England, Saturday, between Carl Froch and George Groves. Froch defending his IBF, WBA, super middleweight belt against top contender Groves. I mean, listen. When we were talking about this, Kent, I kind of gave people some warning that, look, I think Froch, he's not going to be able to dominate this guy. He's not going to overwhelm this guy. I like what I saw from Groves. I thought he was going to give Carl Froch hell. I thought he was going to give him a very tough fight, and he certainly did. Hurt Carl Froch in round one, put him down with a sweet counter left-right hand, made excellent use of the jab, out-jab Froch. Froch tried to fight back a little bit in round 4 or 5, but Groves came right back in round 6. I thought hurt Froch numerous times. And I thought I would never see Froch really hurt and wobbled in the way that George Groves hurt him. But in about round 7 or 8, things started to change a little bit. Groves got a little tired. Froch tried to make up the pressure. In round 9, the controversy ensued. Froch hurt Groves with a right hand up top. Tried to follow up attack. Referee, if I can remember his name correctly, Howard, what's his name?
Howard Foster.
Howard Foster stepped in and stopped the fight. Many deemed it controversial stoppage. I did as well. I think though Groves was hurt, I thought he was going to recover. Kind of robbed the conclusion of the fight from either perspective. Some could say it robbed Groves of a win because it looks like he was on his way to a win. He was up on the scorecards at the end of round 8. And some would argue it robbed Carl Froch of a definitive knockout. That being the case, your assessments of the fight itself and the actions of the referee, Howard Foster.
I think, personally, it was a fast stoppage, but at the same time, I don't think Groves would have went around longer. He was getting tired. I could see it. You know, he was gassing, you know. And I think a lot of that came from the fact he came out very quickly in round 1. and he scored a knockdown. He was very aggressive in round one. He was landing some good counter shots, clean shots, and then he caught, Froch at the end of round one with that left hand, and I think that was the worst possible thing to happen to Groves. I'll explain why. Because I think for the rest of the fight, Groves tried to hurt him again. He tried to knock him out. Like, he tried to go get and try to hurt him again and knock him out. And I think he became too old. He kind of went out of his game plan. I think his game plan was to box. And he did, and he looked like he was going to do that in round one. But then he, all of a sudden, after he hurt him, he was so hell-bent on trying to knock him out that he kind of went away from his game plan a little bit. And I think that cost him down even towards the end of the fight. It wore him down because I think he was putting everything into his punches. He was hurting Froch, yes, but he was not pacing himself properly. And I thought he dominated the fight up until the stoppage. He was pretty much having his own way. I only gave Froch one round. I think that was round 5. Other than that, he was in control. Groves, but like I said, he gassed. And the one thing I could say about Groves during the fight, he was landing very clean counters. He was able to counter everything that Froch was doing. And that was the worst Froch had looked. And I mean, in all of his fights recently, that was the worst he's looked. He just looked kind of old. He's always been slow, but he looked a little bit slower. But he still was able to put on pressure at times. And he was pretty successful with that to a degree. I'm going to say that the stoppage was, like I said, quick, but at the same time, it also may have, like, even though people may say, oh, he could have went on, I don't think he would have lasted much longer, Groves. So you could say Froch was essentially robbed of a stoppage victory, a clean stoppage win. And listen, Groves has nothing to be ashamed of. He proved that he can fight on this level. He can compete on this level. I thought the comments after the fight by Froch were a little, I'm going to say it nicely, delusional. It was like, the knockdown never happened. He wasn't losing the fight. He was always in control. He just viewed it as just like, he was just focused on what he did at the end of the fight. He didn't look at the entire fight and how he was being, outboxed and out. He was just being outdone in every possible way. He was just in denial about it. And I think that irritated some people. And it irritated me because I've always respected Carl Froch. And for him to do that was like, kind of like insulted my intelligence. I'm like, you're basically saying that none of this stuff happened. Groves didn't dominate you for 6+ rounds, and you weren't dropped in round 1, and you weren't hurt several times during the fight. And he just made some really off-color, well, not really off-color, but just comments to try to insult the general public. And frankly, you know what? He can't fool me. He can't. I know what I saw. Okay. At the same time, I don't think there should be a rematch. I'll tell you why. I don't think Froch is going to want one. I think he's just happy that he won the fight. To be honest with you, I think he's happy he won the fight.
In spite of what he was saying after the fight.
Yeah, I think he was just very, very happy. He was very fortunate he won the fight, and I think he's going to move up in weight. I don't think he's going to stay at 68. Because if he stays at 68, Groves is going to want a rematch. And I think he's going to do something to just avoid that rematch and probably go up to 75. I think he fights Kessler again, if you ask me. Groves, I think he has he's back kind of to the drawing board, but he I have no doubts that he will be in a title fight sooner rather than later, and I think the next time he steps up into a title fight, he's going to win. I think he's gonna have a very, very successful career. I don't view this fight as, like what he's gonna become. I think he's shown us that he can compete on a world class level, but his inexperience cost him, and I think that's gonna the fight with Froch is just simply gonna help him down the line. This was just a learning experience. Take nothing away from George Groves. I mean, he fought a hell of a fight, and I don't think this is. I think this is not the last we've seen of him, and I think he's gonna. If he gets into a fight, I bet you if he gets a fight with Stieglitz, he's gonna win. He's gonna win big, I think.
I push back against your thought about your view of Froch not fighting Groves again because specifically over there in Britain. For me, see, look, when Chris Eubank scored a controversial win over Michael Watson back in over 20 years ago now, back in '91, fought him immediately, immediate rematch. And for me, I think this may happen because over there, I think the British public will not let Carl Froch get away with not fighting George Groves, if not immediately, sometime in 2014. Because they will view that as a stain in his career, and they will always remind him of that. So I think that fight will eventually happen. Last question before we move on. Last week I was mentioning that I was wondering whether the consecutive number of tough fights and big bouts that Carl Froch has fought, going back from 2009 in the Super 6 Super Middleweight tournament, will it catch up to him and have an effect on him? Froch looked, not only that Groves was beating Froch at the time, to me he looked a little old, he looked lethargic, he looked slow. He looked like he just didn't have it anymore. And I know that there was some British folks locally was wondering maybe Froch should think about retiring. Do you think this was a case of not just Groves and how well he performed, but maybe age and attrition catching up to Carl Froch?
Yeah, it definitely looked like he's aged. It definitely looks that way. But that takes nothing away from George Groves. He fought great for 6+ rounds. And even prime Froch would have dealt with that better. I don't know, but he kind of looked old. He looks slower than usual. Like he's never been a fast fighter, but he looks slower than usual.
And the thing is, Froch has never been the most coordinated guy in the world, but he was even more of a case in this fight Saturday.
Yeah, you could see there's something amiss now. I think he's losing something, and he's 37 years old. Okay, he's not young anymore. No, and remember, he didn't get to this point. I mean, he didn't get to this level until probably 30, 31, 32. So, I mean, I would say 32. I'm going to give it 32. He didn't get to this level. And I think that, it's catching up to him. I mean, the tough fights, the constant tough fights. Remember, he hasn't had an easy fight. Listen, he hasn't had an easy fight since, I'm going to throw a name out there, and this is how much of a boxing nerd I am. The last easy fight he had was Albert Ryback. And that was before he fought John Pascal.
Yeah.
And that was about
2008.
2008. So he's been fighting for the last 5 years on a very, 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 very high level. A lot of tough fights. Pascal, Jermaine Taylor, Ward, Kessler,
Abraham, Boutte.
Groves,
Kessler again.
Kessler again, Yusef Mack. He's just been fighting at a very, 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 very high level, and eventually he catches up with you. But that just shows you who Carl Froch is as a fighter. He wanted to fight the best, and he got in the ring and fought the best. And I have no doubt that he's going to be a Hall of Famer when this is all said and done. But I think that's part of it. But I also think age. You start to creep up on some miles at 37. I mean, especially the fights he's had recently, fights that have gone the distance and have been tough. Of course, you're going to age in the ring. And I think there's signs that he's probably past his prime. And I think, his prime lasted longer than most. So, I mean, he's past it now slightly. So, but at the same time, I still see him being in some good fights. And I don't think he's going to fall off the wheels completely yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. We're going to have a short show this evening since it is the holiday season. No real news notes, worthy things going on in the sport of boxing. Let's move on and talk about do a preview of the upcoming bouts. Specifically, the bouts is going to be, well, let me take that back. It was one bout that happened today over in Sydney, Australia, as Shane Mosley fought Anthony Mundine. I don't know if you saw the fight, Kent. I saw a little bit of it. Mundine's technically was a TKO in round 6, I believe, round 7. But what really happened is Mosley's back gave out. What have you seen about? And what was your assessment of what went down, or
I haven't
what you've seen, or what you've read, or what you heard?
Yeah, well, from what I understand is that it was a competitive fight. Mundine was winning. He was using his jab effectively. Shane came out in the early rounds trying to get a knockout, and I think, from what I understand, it didn't really, work out for him, and he kind of slowed down after that. Within the first 2 or 3 rounds, he's kind of slowed down after that, and Mundine took over a little bit, but a lot of people said it could have gone either way. Some people I know had it scored 4-2 for Mundine, 3-3. It was that type of fight. I know some people had it a shutout, which I thought was quite ridiculous from what I've heard and read. So, I mean, it's kind of a shock, actually, because we never thought, like, it was a kind of a dangerous fight to begin with, but you never expect Mosley, even at this point in his career, to lose to a guy like Mundine, and not by the way it's going to be on the record. According to BoxRec, it's a retirement in the corner after round 6.
Yeah, I was watching. What little bit I've seen it about Mosley, it was a case of Mosley trying to go gung-ho for the KO. It didn't happen. And when it didn't happen, he didn't have nothing left. And eventually, because of that and the fact that Mundine was landing a very good jab throughout the bout, it kind of caused problems for Mosley back. And at that point, he kind of, gave in and would say he wanted no more. Given that the case, I look at this and I think it's probably time for Mosley to retire. I think nothing of Mundine. I've said it before. I hope I don't hold back my tongue with him. I think he's a guy who talks a lot, but has never lived up to his mouth. C-level fighter at best. So this is not this fight speaks to how Mosley has regressed, even if has regressed, and it's time for him to go, because again, this win by Mundine, I know they're talking about with Floyd Mayweather. That's ridiculous. It says nothing to me. Your thoughts about Mosley? Should he really go for good this time?
Yes, I think Mosley should retire. He has nothing left to prove. We boxing fans respect him. We know how great of a fighter he was in his prime. But he's always been a guy, Now that I think about it, he's never dealt with bigger guys very well. For example, Vernon Forrest, Mundine today. So I think he should go. I don't think there's any reason to keep fighting. There's really no reason. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him like James Toney. Because if anybody's sort of prize fighter the other week, oh my God! I mean, you could barely even hear him talk. You could barely understand anything he's saying, and it's sad because a lot of people respect James Toney. There's a lot of people that won't fight James Toney because they respect him so much, and they know that he's brain damaged, and he just don't want to do that to him. But I don't want to see Shane like that. That'll be another guy that we kind of, me and you grew up watching, suffer an injury and from going on too long. And I don't want to see Shane go on too long. I think Shane's gone on long enough, past his prime, past his best day. I think he should just hang it up. Mundine, you know what? He'll never shut up about this fight. For as long as he friggin' lives, we're going to have to hear him talk about how he beat Shane Mosley. Well, sir, do you realize you beat a Shane Mosley that was 5 years past his prime?
5 years?
5 to maybe 7 years. I 7.
Maybe like 10.
Yeah, 10. Yeah,
more than that.
Yeah, more than that. I'm just trying to be fair. I'd say about 10. 7 to 10 years past his prime, and he's sitting there gloating like it's some sort of an accomplishment. Well, sir, Anthony Mundine, you were the same guy that got knocked out by that awesome knockout puncher, Sven Otka. You were the same guy that lost to Al Kessler. You're the same guy that got knocked out by Garth Wood. You're the same guy that got his ass handed to him by Daniel Geale, not once, but 2 times. You got a gift in the first fight. You're not man enough to admit it, so I'm going to admit it for you. And he's a C-level fighter. He's a C-level fighter prancing around. I can't even take him seriously. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that man, Anthony Mundine, should not be taken seriously as a legit contender. He beat Mosley. He beat an old Mosley. He beat a faded Mosley. He didn't beat a prime Mosley. I can understand if he beat a prime Mosley. He beat a completely faded Mosley. But he's going to go around wanting a Floyd fight, and I know what he's going to do. I know exactly what Floyd's going to do. He's going to entertain this fight. That's what he's going to do. And he's going to make the fight with Mundine at a catchweight like 150, 152 pounds. And we're going to have to be subjected to that nonsense. Because we already know that Floyd's not going to fight a dangerous guy. He won't even entertain a fight with Pacquiao now. So I already know he's going to fight Mundine. If he's going to fight Khan, he might as well fight Mundine and get it over with, because it's a disgrace, okay? And I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to entertain the fight with Mundine. He's going to make the fight with Mundine. And he's going to dominate the fight and once again claim he's the greatest fighter ever. But when was the last time he fought an A-level fighter? I can't remember the last time. I don't know if you can even like look at his resume and find an A-level fighter. I mean, really.
The closest one is Mikkel Kessler, and he lost that badly.
No, I'm talking about Floyd.
Oh, Floyd, you talking about? Well,
I mean, he has a couple, but recently it's all been B-level fighters. The only one I can give him true credit for was Castillo, and he was a A- fighter, maybe even a B fighter.
Well, Marquez. I give Marquez credit.
Yeah,
Marquez was smaller.
I give him Marquez, but he didn't beat Marquez at his best weight. Beat him at 147 pounds, and he came in out of shape. He came in heavier. So I'm not going to even go into Floyd anymore. I don't even care anymore about what he does. I think I'm pretty much over Floyd. But he's going to entertain. I bet he entertains the fight with Mundine. He makes the fight with Mundine. He beats Mundine. He claims he's the greatest fighter ever, yada, yada, yada. It's the same shtick over and over and over. He did the same thing when he beat Canelo. Oh, I'm the greatest fighter ever. But Mundine is not a legit contender. Mundine is a guy that's just around. That the only reason why he's even relevant is because of his mouth. He never backs up his talk. Every time he loses, he makes some sort of dumb comment. And if you want to look up some of his stupid remarks, go look up the comments he made about 9/11 and some of the racial comments he's made recently, and you can see how much of an idiot he is. He's also the same person several years back that actually got an infection in his eye because he cleaned his contact with his tongue. This is how ignorant this man and how stupid this man is. So I would suggest everybody who wants to know more about this man to look that stuff up and then look at what he is as a fighter, and immediately ignore him because he's not relevant. The only person that'll make him relevant is Floyd. That's the only person. No one cares about him. No one wants to bother him. No one wants to see him. He had trouble even packing out the arena for people in his own country to want to watch him fight. So that just shows you how relevant he is. So can we just not talk about him anymore?
Absolutely. Let's move on and do a preview. Of what's going to happen, what's going to go down this weekend. Doubleheader in Quebec City, light heavyweight doubleheader. Adonis Stevenson going to be fighting his mandatory. Tony Bellew, Stevenson defending his WBC light heavyweight belt. On the undercard of that, or the co-feature, I should say, Sergey Kovalev going to be defending his WBO belt against Ismayl Sillakh in what looks to be an eventual showdown should both Stevenson and Kovalev win. Looks like an eventual showdown between the two sometime in 2014 on HBO. But let's go into a little bit of each of these individual fights. Let's start with Stevenson and Bellew. Mandatory for Stevenson. Look, Bellew is a decent enough fighter. We talked about him before with frequent friend of the show, frequent guest, Ryan, aka No Holds Barred Boxing. Bellew's decent, but in looking at this fight, I don't see Stevenson having too many problems with Bellew, to be honest with you.
No, I think Stevenson's speed and power is going to be a little bit too much at the end of the day. I think Bellew's a pretty basic fighter. I mean, he does have talent. He's a good boxer, but he doesn't do anything special. He's sort of like Nathan Cleverly. Good boxer, decent pop, knows how to fight, but just doesn't do anything extraordinary. And we've seen Bellew struggle recently, against Isaac Chilemba in 2 fights. He didn't look particularly impressive in either one of the fights. And I don't know if I think what's going to happen against Stevenson. I think Bellew does better than people think. At the end of the day, I think he loses either a wide decision or gets stopped late in that fight. I don't think he's gonna get crushed, knocked out with one shot. I truly think we don't know. I don't know how good Bellew's chin is, but he's shown a decent chin as far as I know. I just don't think he's gonna get taken out with one shot, or caught, clean. I think he's gonna probably be competitive for maybe 3 or 4 rounds, and then I think the speed and power of Stevenson takes over, and I think Stevenson wins comfortably.
I agree. I think Stevenson wins comfortably. I like the way that he showed some boxing skills against Tavares Cloud. I look at this battle with Stevenson and Bellew, and I see the same thing that I saw with Gradovich and Dill, in which we talked about earlier on the show. I think that Bellew, I don't think he can box with Stevenson, and I don't know if he has anything to hold Stevenson off. So I think if Stevenson, it may take him some time, but I think eventually he'll find his way against Bellew and eventually wear him down and stop him sometime late in the bout. Let's talk about Kovalev and Sillakh. Uh, I see no chance of Sillakh winning. I just have to be honest. I don't think he has the chin to take Kovalev's punches, who looked terrific in his stoppage of Nathan Cleverly earlier this summer. He cannot outbox. He cannot box with Kovalev. I just see a no-hoper here with Sillakh.
You know, I've been kind of going back and forth on this fight. I've been trying to see, you know, because I actually looked at fights outside of the Gracha fight with Sillakh, you know, and I kind of see a guy that can box. Okay, I know he can box because he's a very accomplished fighter. You know, as far as amateur credentials, and you know, he does have skill. My thing is, how does he deal with a guy like Kovalev? Like, how does he deal with somebody who's very active and throws a lot of punches? I think the key to the fight will be how Sillakh, his game plan, I think. This is going to be the key to the fight, I think, the game plan. If he stands in front of Kovalev, he's going to get smoked. If he tries to box smartly and with some, and has a really solid game plan by boxing, I think he's competitive for quite a bit, I think. But at the end of the day, I think the work rate of Kovalev and the power is going to eventually get to Sillakh, and I think he stops Sillakh. But I think that Sillakh is going to show a lot more than people think. They think it's a no-hope fight on paper, but people tend to forget Sillakh accomplished a lot on the amateur level. He does have skill. Okay, everybody looks at him as the guy that got knocked out by Grachev, but people tend to forget he was dominating Grachev up until that point. He was pretty much dominating him. And he dominated a Cuban before that. Trying to remember his name. I don't remember his name. Light heavyweight Cuban.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember.
España.
Yeah. ESP Friday Night Fights bout. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna say that he's a no-hoper, but I will say that Kovalev wins. But I think Sillakh shows a lot more than people are gonna guess or suspect. I think he's a much better fighter than what he showed against Grachev, but I still think he gets stopped.
In other words, one of the best strategies for Sillakh to box him early, hope to take Kovalev some rounds, and see where it goes there, given that the one question mark on Kovalev is he's never really been the distance against a solid fighter.
Yes, exactly. That's, I think, what Kovalev is going to... I mean, that's what I think Sillakh is going to do. I don't think he's going to stand in front of him. I think he's not that dumb. I don't think anybody should be dumb enough to stand in front of Kovalev. And I just think he's going to try to take him some rounds, but I think at some point Kovalev's going to make him fight, and I think he catches Sillakh. But you never know. I think that this is kind of a danger fight if you think about it. Because what if Sillakh is able to negotiate the early rounds and take Kovalev deeper than he's ever been before, and Sillakh ends up, making it a very tight fight and steals it? You never know, because if he fights smart enough, he could. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's unlikely. But at the same time, it's still a danger fight. I mean, I would be more sure. Like, Kovalev has a pretty strong chance of winning, but at the same time, I think the higher percentage probably goes to Stevenson right now. To me, anyway.
Yeah, maybe I'm just my vantage point is skewed based off the Sillakh loss. Based on how impressive Kovalev looked against Cleverly. I just think that Kovalev, he is a better technical boxer than people give him credit for. I think at some point it may show. He's going to show that, and I think this fight will be that fight. And plus, again, given the way Sillakh lost, I just wonder if Kovalev catches him on the chin with a few shots, how well he can take it. Kovalev is the hardest puncher in the division. I don't think Sillakh will take it well if he gets caught, and I just think that's going to be the determining factor here.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen too, but I know what Sillakh is going to do. Like, I know that's his game plan, and I know as far as credentials amateur-wise, I know this is the pro game, completely different, but as far as amateur credentials, if you put both guys, I think Sillakh is a little bit more accomplished. I mean, he accomplished a lot more in the amateurs, and he has. I think he's a little bit more skillful. But like you said, we don't know how he's going to take one on the chin, and I don't know, how long he's able to hold, Kovalev off if he doesn't hurt him. So I think Kovalev stops him, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went longer than people think.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think on that note, we're going to close down and end the show today, or this evening, I should say. Any last words for the people before we head out, Kent?
Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the fights. A lot of good ones this weekend and coming up in the weeks ahead. And support boxing, question boxing, always be critical of boxing. And hope everybody enjoys this weekend.
Absolutely. I can have no more to add to that. I can only co-sign what he said. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Continue to support boxing and continue to support this show. And I think I'd like to say thank you to everybody who shares the show on Twitter, who shares the blog on Twitter. Thank you so much. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, we're going to be talking a lot. Big bouts happening the weekend of the 7th. Guillermo Rigondeaux is going to be fighting on HBO. Chris John is going to be fighting a very good bout, I think, with South African fighter by the name of Venyeka. Devin Alexander makes his return to the ring. Arislani Lara and Austin Trout. All that's going to be happening on the 7th. The John bout is going to be happening on the 6th, by the way. Interesting flyweight bout between Akira Yagashi and Edgar Sosa in Tokyo. Going to be happening the day before that. So we will try to talk about all those bouts on the next episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. And IBF middleweight champion Darren Barker, he's going to be making his initial title defense against Felix Sturm in Germany as well. So we're going to be talking about that. I want to thank Kent for joining me again this week. Again, for those who want to check out information about the Pound for Pound Boxing Report, there are two places you can go. You can go to the official blog page, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. You can also go to the podcast page, p4pboxingreport.podomatic.com, where you'll find on both of those pages, you can find past episodes of the show as well as information where to find us all over the internet. I want to thank you again, Kent, for joining me again this week. This has been another episode of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I want to wish everybody in the States a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, eat all the food, and drink all the drinks you can. This has been another episode. You have a good evening. You guys have a good evening. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Good night.
Good night.